Welcome, everybody. Episode 166 of Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in life and in business. Just before I tell you about what happened that made me laugh, cheers. Hope you've had a great week. Great to join you for a drink. I know. This is just vodka and a glass of ice. Because my garnishments from my bar were stolen by someone in my household, apparently, and also my shaker is dirty from someone else in my household. So I just started shooting this show about 10 minutes ago, and about 5 minutes or 10 minutes into it, I said the word navigation. Hey Siri, navigation. I've turned her off. And so when I started talking about navigation and a trip that I am taking starting tonight, Siri took over my iPad that I'm recording on, and she said she can't find a trip and ruined the whole show. So I had to stop and delete that recording and find a way to turn Siri off, and I guess I have done so. So let's move on. Is COVID over? Is the whole global pandemic coming to an end? It feels like it is, right? I know this is my personal interpretation on this, and other people are struggling and what have you, but I leave tonight for a business trip, and in the next 10 days, I'll be in 11 cities. Some of those are repeated, so, I'm kind of going here and back there, that sort of thing. But yeah, 11 stops in 10 days. Feels like the old days. I know for our American friends, my American listeners, associates, people I do business with, they're just back like this never happened. In most of the states, not all of the states. Cheers again. So I want to talk today about mental filters. And a mental filter is a type of cognitive distortion, psychologists might tell you. So it's a biased way of thinking about ourselves in the world in which we operate. A cognitive distortion, mental filter. So I was working on my personal branding website with the marketing team a couple of days ago. And for that, I have to write the copy, the text that goes on to the website. And this is really not for Sinclair Range, my business. You can go to sinclairrange.com, see what we do, all that sort of stuff. You can register for our newsletters, which you ought to be doing if you haven't been, because that gives a great update on a monthly basis with respect to our business and my business. But this is a personal website. I forget what the domain is going to be. We'll talk about that when we're ready to launch, which is still a few months away, I am sure. But the personal website is more about my content that I produce. And the idea is, business turnarounds, life turnarounds, and I've come up with, on the business side, really a three-legged stool, a three-pillar packaging of the content that I provide. And I was arguing with the marketing people about that. And so the three pillars are, don't forget, this is a business context, okay? You're running a business, you're in trouble. The three pillars of my content are you, because as a leader, as an owner, you are part of the problem and you need to change to get out of trouble. The second pillar is leadership, right? So the business needs to change. We had a long talk about that. I'll get to that sort of later in today's episode here. But the business needs to change. And to change, you need leadership. And so that's the second pillar. So you, leadership, and then technical. And what do I mean by that? The technical skills. You need to, as I say on the website text, which you'll see in a few months, because running out of money during a turnaround is not an option. You need to have the technical skills to do a cash flow, to understand asset-based lending and availability and financial instruments and that sort of stuff. But that's not enough. You also need to be a turnaround leader. You need to be able to empower your people, and you need to work on yourself. Because if that wasn't true, you wouldn't be in trouble, more than likely. And then, so I was trying to understand what work on yourself means. What's a better way to say this other than you? And the heart of the content really comes down to positivity, empowering your people, so not being authoritative in a turnaround situation, which sort of bridges on the leadership, but also your own issues. But really, the positivity is a big one for me, and you listeners to my content will know I talk about positivity all the time. And so I'm trying to think to myself, well, how do I describe that in words? And I came up, I wondered if mental filter is a word, because clearly it boils down to habits, and then what I believe to be your cognitive distortion, the way that you view facts and look at things and think about things. So I Googled mental filters to see if that was something that I could talk about. Sure enough, it was. And that's the way the content is heading. But in the course of doing that, I ran across an article in 2017, I believe, in Success Magazine by a fellow named Jon Patrick Hatcher. Never heard of this guy. He claims to be, I'm sure he is, a cognitive behavioral therapist. And the article is called 20 Stealthy Mental Filters That Are Sabotaging You. And it was a great article. I thought it was a great article. It's obviously a few years old now, maybe close to 4 years old now. And I have no idea who Jon Patrick Hatcher is. So I would give more of a reference to his content if I had any idea who this person was. I just picked that name up from the article. But you can Google this, I'm sure, and you can research it further if you want. But the reason I raise it is I want to talk about these 20 mental filters that Mr. Hatcher wrote about in Success Magazine because they're really interesting. And a lot of them I agree with, and we talk about all the time on Martinis with Scott. Some of them I don't agree with. What are your thoughts? Let's go through these, and what are your thoughts? And if you have some of these cognitive distortions, these mental filters, how are you going to deal with it? What are you going to do? And again, this applies to the article of John's relates to your life. It doesn't just relate to business or to business at all. It relates to, as it says, that are sabotaging you, not sabotaging your business. So he says there's dozens of common mental filters, which is true. When you have this Scott Adams would describe it as a movie on a screen. And so there's two broad factions in the US, for example, politically, socially speaking. And so there's two movies on one screen. You see the same set of facts and interpret them entirely different. Well, the truth is we all operate through filters. We've talked about mental filters. We've talked about that many times on Martinis with Scott. And these mental filters are the way our brain works. We have the answer, and then we search for facts that fit the answer. That's called a filter, right? So we have the answer up front, and then we look for facts that fit that, or we distort facts that are contrary, or we ignore facts that are completely contrary, as if they weren't even real, okay? And that's what a cognitive bias is. That's what a cognitive distortion is. That's what we talk about mental filters, which is that sort of the preconceived answer. And so Mr. Hatcher here says that, there's 20 filters that are very common and directly inhibit or prevent your success and your joy in daily life. So there's the setup. And so filter number one, negative predicting. Negative predicting involves foretelling the future in a negative light. There's typically just as many, and he says, this is just wrong. There's typically as many reasons that things might go right. But, if you have the idea that you're going to give a presentation at work, right? Or you're going to go on a trip, or you're going to go meet a new person and ask for a date, instead of thinking things are going to go well, you just predict that things are going to be chaos. They're going to be terrible, right? Negative predicting. So negative predicting leads to, according to John, insecurity, lack of confidence, fear of failure. 100% agree. If you're negative, if you view everything as you're going to fail, it leads to a fear of failure, a lack of confidence, insecurity. And as I've always said on this show, you need to think positive. And it's not because positivity in and of itself that there's a specific power in that. The biggest power of positivity is that you're not negative. Because negativity is the big issue. It leads to paralysis. It leads to lack of action. It leads to fear. It leads to all sorts of terrible things. And so I completely agree with that. I was, you think about an athlete, and I was strong in athletics for a while in certain categories, and people say, you need to visualize winning. You need to visualize. Does visualize winning as an athlete mean you're going to win? No, right? It doesn't. You can't just visualize your way. Could I visualize my way to being in the NBA? No, I could not do that. I'm past middle age. I'm a middle 50-year-old white guy who's not very tall and terrible at basketball, right? I'm not going to be in the NBA, and I can't visualize my way there. But if I was qualified to be in the NBA, and I didn't believe in myself, that I believed that I couldn't do it, if I believed that I was going to lose, could I be successful as an athlete? No. It's the power of not being negative that's really important. And so negative predicting is a filter that you just see all too common, and you need to break that. By the way, you break that a couple of ways. I'll talk about that at the end. But one way is you start winning, right? Just anything. Just pick something and win, and then you gain momentum. There's a reason Martinis with Scott is called a show about winning momentum in life and in business. All right, number 2, unrelenting standards. So unrelenting standards is the mindset that extremely high standards are required to avoid calamity. This is letting the great being the enemy of the good. You've heard that expression, speed kills. I like to say in business, lack of speed kills, and your prejudice needs to be to get it out the door. Perfection is a sign of lack of confidence. It's interesting. I actually struggle with this personally. I'm a bit of perfectionist, particularly in writing and in math and in presentation. I'm not a bit. I'm completely obsessed with perfectionism in this. And I don't know why that is. It may be because I was trained as a professional. I'm a professional chartered accountant, a CPA, if I were to use the right acronym for that. And when you're an accountant, you can't make mistakes. You just can't make mistakes. So it's drilled into you. This is the element of professionalism, is to deliver it perfect and deliver it on time, right? And not to be a jerk about it. That's professionalism in a nutshell. So maybe it's because I was trained that way, or maybe it's because I started being entrepreneurial in my late 20s, and I was on the Zoom call, FaceTime early this morning with my father, and I have this haircut, and they're like, "Hey, Mom and Dad are like, it's getting really gray. You didn't get it dyed?" I said, "No, I've never had it dyed." And then I told them a story. I remember when I was about 30, I was really tempted to actually dye my hair to put some gray just in the sides, because I figured that was worth about $100,000 a year to me, as a young entrepreneur who was doing pretty well, but who was never taken seriously sometimes, or I felt that. I don't know if it's true, but my lack of confidence at the time, because of my age, my insecurity because of my age, led me to believe that I ought to have maybe some grayer temples, and so maybe my perfectionism, my goal for that, my struggle for that, has to do with when I was much younger. I felt like if I was 29, 30, and I was in the middle of a large investment banking deal, and I was making errors on slides, or errors in grammar, or errors on Excel spreadsheets, I just couldn't afford to do that. That would just ruin me, because I couldn't hammer home the preconceived notion of potential clients and lenders and bankers and equity people that maybe I was just a young punk who didn't take things too seriously. And so I don't know why I struggle with that, but that's a big one for me. So unrelenting standards. Black and white thinking allows no middle ground or shades of gray. Nothing is ever black and white. And I talk all the time about my ATM OG acronym for negotiation and persuasion. I won't repeat that at the moment because I'm going to run out of time. I'm certain of that. But persuasion requires trust. That's the T in the ATM OG. And trust requires empathy. Empathy requires understanding, or is understanding, of the counterparty. Nothing is black and white. You need to look for those shades. But I would also say that I think a bigger, more deadly negative cognitive distortion is thinking that everything is shady and nothing is black and white, nothing is absolute, and therefore you're unable to make decisions. And I see this all the time in troubled companies, all the time. Yeah, we can't do this because I always say that when you walk into a troubled business, everybody knows the answer. Ask the employees. They know the answer. What they don't know is the context and how to get it done. They don't believe it can be done because of the shade. They just They just don't make decisions. Okay, so beware of that one. Beware of the black and white. It's true. There's nuance in everything, but you also need to make decisions. So I don't think either cognitive distortion or mental filter is the right answer. Number 4, masturbation. No, you heard that wrong. M-U-S-T, masturbation. Involves having steadfast rules about how you and others must behave. I'd never even heard this word before. I looked it up as a psychology word. How relevant, I mean, I don't know how this applies to business, but think about just life in general. Involving having steadfast rules about how you and others must behave. The emotional consequence when expectations are not met are anger, frustration, resentment, and guilt. How relevant is that to today's woke culture? How much time and energy in people's life is wasted on social media trying to hold others to a standard for what? For what? For no other reason than virtue signal, to prove to yourself that you're not a terrible person. You're not a terrible person because you're holding somebody else to a standard that's completely unreasonable. Masturbation with a U. Number 5, self-serving bias. For many, being right is more important than the facts and feelings of the others. Oh my. In business, when you work with troubled companies, I always talk about you need to skip senior management, you need to skip middle management, you need to go straight to the employees. You need to ask them what's up. You need to ask them, why is this company struggling? How do we make more money? Why do I tell you you're doing that? You're doing it because you're getting past the cognitive bias, the cognitive distortion of senior and middle management, which is what? Which is, no, we already tried that. It doesn't work, that bias. And then they look for reasons that they're right. And by the way, it's a negative cognitive distortion, as pointed out by John here, but it's completely natural. We all do it. Our whole human experience is based on pattern recognition. Is based on pattern recognition. And if the pattern recognition is that doesn't work, right? Then it's more important to you to be right and not experience the cognitive dissonance, the mental anguish that comes with being wrong. That's way more important to you than saving your job, saving the business, saving the jobs of all your employees. When I say it, when you hear it, you think, well, that can't be true. But it is true because, you could fail and you could blame somebody else. And that's way easier mentally and emotionally than admitting that you're wrong. Okay. 6, basing future decisions on sunk costs. What is the sunk cost? The sunk cost is something that has already happened. And if you're making a decision on something that's already happened, well, that already happened. And you can't unchange it unless you have a time machine. I'm going to guess you don't have a time machine. So you can't come back and unsay what you just said. You can't go back and unsee what you already saw. Right? Those are sunk costs, and to make current decisions based on those sunk costs is just bad critical thinking. On Martinis with Scott, we talk about critical thinking all the time. If I'm at the roulette table at the casino, which I have been from time to time, and I bet on red and I lose, and then I bet on red because it's got to turn black, right? It's 50-50 except for the greens, so it's a little under 50-50. I bet on red again and I lose, and I bet on red again and I lose, and 10 times in a row it turns up black. I'm betting on red every time and it turns up black 10 times in a row. It's got to be a certainty, doesn't it? On the 11th time that it's going to turn up red, I'm going to win the 11th time. I could just keep doubling my bet and I could make it. And the answer, what are the odds of it spinning black again? And the answer is slightly less than 50, because yes, it will equal out over time. If you forget about the green, often on most wheels there'd be 2 green spaces. If you forgot about those, well, then it would over time be 50% red, 50% black. But that's, infinity is a really long time. And so at a micro level, on the 11th spin, it's still 50-50. It doesn't matter that 10 times it went black in a row. It doesn't matter. And by the way, that's the reason for table limits. That's the reason that you can't just keep doubling forever. It doesn't work. And I have lost on that. It was a tough lesson when I was younger to understand that infinity is a really long time. And so believe me when I tell you that. 7, the fallacy of fairness distortion. assumes that things have to be measured, things that have to be measured based on fairness and equality, when in reality, things don't work that way. I don't see that a lot in business because business is more of a competitive culture, a team building culture, whatever the case may be. But in life, like outside of business, wow, do you see that a lot? We talked about woke culture before. Things that you see in social media, things that you see in the news. This whole divide globally, I think it's comes out of the U.S. media a lot, but I think it's a global issue about this equality of outcome based on a fairness. It is, of course, a complete fallacy. I mean, you could get equality of opportunity, but people don't even want outcomes that are equal. They want outcomes that are relevant to themselves. But based on this fallacy of fairness distortion, there's a great deal of the world that believes that equality of outcome is the right answer. So let me be an example of that fallacy of distortion, that fallacy of fairness being a negative bias that really influences and drags down your life. Number 8, underestimating your coping ability to handle negative events. I've told you before stories, particularly with some guests that I've had, about how if you're in my business, you just become numb to the stresses of insolvency, to the stresses of not being able to pay your bank, of the bankruptcy trustee coming in, of payrolls being missed, which is a horrible thing. But these are just day-to-day events for someone in my world, right? That you need to deal with. You just need to fix that problem. You need to get these stakeholders and the people impacted back on side. But if you're not used to that, if you're just a new entrepreneur and you end up in a partnership dispute or a shareholder battle or litigation, I mean it's a negative event that you have no context for. It is devastating. It's devastating. So underestimating your ability to deal with these things, yeah, for sure, that's a cognitive distortion that can bring you down. Number 9, entitlement. Entitlement is a filter that causes the belief that the same rules that apply to others should not apply to you. Listen, no one owes you anything ever. If you're not going through life with that attitude in business and just in life in general, if you're not, as an employee, oh my goodness, if you're not going through your life with the attitude that no one owes you anything, it's all on you, you're making a huge mistake, and that brings you down. Number 10, repeating the same behavior, hoping for different results, is Einstein's definition of insanity. How many times have you heard me say that? Every company I go into that's troubled, you got to change. That's what a turnaround leader does. You have to change because what you're doing isn't working. What you're doing isn't working. If you have trouble, what you're doing isn't working. To think that you could keep doing it and things are going to work doesn't make any sense. You need to change, right? I talked to you about my 3 pillars of content, my 3-legged stool. You need to work on you need to work on leadership, turnaround leadership. You need to work on your technical skills. Well, the turnaround leadership part, I say leadership because your business needs to change. You want to fix your business, you need to change. All right, 11, personalizing is a thought distortion and belief that things others do or say is some kind of personal direct reaction on you. So true. When I was, I still do it today. But when I told you I was on my own as an entrepreneur when I was in my late 20s and 30s, and I'd be in a deal, and the other side of the deal, the banker, the lender, the prospect didn't call me back. We were in the middle of it. Person disappeared. Didn't call, didn't email. Once we had emails, didn't call, didn't email, and I would just internally freak out. Like I would stay up for days, muddling and worrying about this process. And I'm not much of a worrier, but my brain processes stuff nonstop. And was I rejected? What have I done wrong? What could I do better? Like I'd just be really stressed about this. And almost 100% of the time, I'm not going to say always, but almost 100% of the time, it had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with me. People have their own issues. You know, the amount of time that people spend thinking about you is nowhere close to what you think it is. They just don't think about you. You personalize everything, you're going to be dragged down. So I completely agree with this point. Number 12, blaming. Blaming is the opposite of personalizing. Maybe. I don't know if it's the opposite of personalizing, but definitely victim mentality is alive and well in life and in business. You need to go through life. My advice to you, if you want my advice, I try not to give it. I just try to tell you what works for me, and you get to pick and choose. You get to pick and choose if that makes any sense for you at all. But everything, you need to just have the attitude that everything is on you. Everything is on you. It doesn't matter what it is. It's on you. And then if you do that, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's a way to program your brain. And if you do that, you're going to force yourself to think about ways to be better. If you're just victim blaming, you're never going to try to be better. Okay. We talk about this a lot in business, by the way. I always give the example of a troubled company needs more money for the bank, and their pitch is, I can't make payroll. How are you going to help me? How are you going to help me? Like, you've been cutting back my line. I need more from you, or it's all just going to go down and you're going to lose a bunch of money, Mr. Banker. That's the pitch. That's blaming them. That's saying, hey, it's not me. You could also blame the economy. You can blame, whatever, a certain employee who's not performing. You're blaming somebody else instead of taking responsibility and coming up with an action plan. That's persuasion. Blaming somebody else is not. Number 13, in-group bias is a tendency to trust and respect people who are like you more than those from different backgrounds and experiences. Here's where I start to go offside with John. This is 100% true. There's in-group bias, and people do trust and respect people who are like them more than they trust and respect other people, but that's called being human. I don't know that that's a negative cognitive distortion. It's something we need to be aware about, that we operate in bubbles, that there is racism in the world, that we're more comfortable with pattern recognition, that is more common to us. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And we're less comfortable with things that are not common to us. That is how human brains operate. What's important is that you recognize that you know that you operate in bubbles, that you know that somebody who's different from you automatically causes a discomfort, and you need to fight that, right? That's just the way it is. 100% of everybody does that. I don't know if that's a real, should be on the list. Maybe it should. I don't know. Overthinking is a mindset that worry and rumination will lead to solutions. Worry and rumination will lead to solutions. I don't think that's expressed well, but I have told you on this show before, and I believe I stole this from Ray Dalio, so you can go look up his content, like a multi-billionaire hedge fund manager out of New York. And if I got it wrong, whatever, but this is, this is what I believe in, whether Ray said that or not, is you need to proceed on 70% of the information. And that's a good way to mathematically think about this, to divvy it up in your brain. Like, you don't want to just go with a 50-50, just sort of a crapshoot. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But you can't wait for 100. You can't wait for 90% of the information, because speed is important. Lack of speed kills in business. So act on 70% of the information. Don't overthink anything. Have some reliance on your ability to execute once you are in the door. Number 50, multitasking doesn't extend beyond, don't multitask. I'm not going to read what he wrote there. I don't disagree with this. His point is, and this is psychologically true, that the human brain doesn't multicast. It doesn't do two things at once. It switches really quickly between one thing and then. If you're doing two things at once, if you're on the phone and you're writing an email at the same time, your brain is not on the phone and writing an email at the same time. It's on the phone, it's listening, and then it stops and it goes to write some email, and then a fraction or a nanosecond later it goes back to the phone, and a nanosecond later it goes back to the email. Okay, that's the way it works. It's going bing back between these different tasks that you're multitasking on. So what people tell you is you're better off. So you're not doing either thing well. You're better off focusing on just the one thing. But sometimes the one thing's really slow. I was on a call the other day, and this person just like fills in the hour. It just talks so slow. And while they're off thinking about something, while they're trying to have my attention, I could get out 3 emails without them even knowing and miss zero. It's a busy world. I'm all about multitasking, and I'm not going to agree with John's point on this one. 16, failure to chill. According to a report, 23% of workers surveyed said they use all of their paid time off. They did not use all of their paid time off for the last 12 months. If you don't recharge, you could be anxious. You could have depression and lack in productivity. I 100% disagree with this. When you need a break, go take a break. Go take a walk, do your thing. You want a 2-week holiday, go do a 2-week holiday. In my businesses, I don't track holidays. Just be available. If you want to go away to the cottage and not work, that's fine. That's fine. Get your job done. And when I call you, I need you to answer the phone. That's kind of my rules. And so I don't care what the contract says. I tell people that up front. You want to go away for a month? Go away for a month. Be available. Okay. And I don't mean be available to work 12 hours on your computer. I mean, get your work done. And then just be available for a call if I have an emergency. That's the rules. If you're burnt out, if you have anxiety, if you have depression, there's real chemical and psychological reasons for depression. I don't want to minimize that. But if it's the work and the stress that's doing it, it's a lack of purpose, right? With the right why, you can overcome everything. Okay, with the right why, you can overcome everything. You need the purpose. And so I disagree. I disagree with this at all. I don't think that's a frame. I think it's a lack of purpose that causes that problem. 17, cheating on your goals in lieu of making up later, spending work days on your fantasy football draft with plans to make it up later this week is self-sabotage. I rate no on that. Number one, because I do this all the time, not with fantasy football, but other things. But number two isn't this exactly conflicted with the point above, failure to chill? Isn't working on your fantasy football draft a mental break and in fact chilling? I'm not buying this at all. I'm not worried about that. What do you think? What do you think? The point of this was not to agree with everything, but to have a discussion about that. Let me know. 18, doubling down on a failed strategy, hoping it will eventually yield positive results. I once did a martinis with Scott. I forget what the title was, but it was basically quit. I was encouraging you to quit. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, as we talked about earlier, and you're expecting better results, Einstein's definition of insanity. Don't quit your purpose. Change your strategy. Doubling down on a failed strategy for sure is a mistake. I've given you lots of examples of that. 19, catastrophizing. Being extremely well educated about all things that could go wrong and expecting the worst. I don't even know what this one means. I think John was running out of bullet points for his 20 item list. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to move on to number 20. I can't change my way of thinking. Rather than convincing yourself that changing mentalities is too hard, aim for small reductions, yada, yada. This is the heart of the matter. You have this list of, I've agreed with 2/3 of it, right? You have this list of items that are cognitive distortions that are just bringing you down and holding you back from success. Cool. What are you going to do about it? Like, how do you change that? It's hard. It's really, really hard to change cognitive bias, which is what we're talking about. That I think this is the heart of the matter. If you have any of these filters that we've talked about, and I have some of these filters that we talked about, as I told you, here's 3 things that I can recommend to you. Number 1, and most important, is you need to really know, you need to understand that this is about pattern recognition within the brain. The brain is not equipped to look at a bunch of facts and make a decision. I always tell the example, the analogy of you're driving down the highway. You're driving down the highway, you're 7 hours, it's dusk or dark, and you're not tired, but you're just kind of zoned out, and you're just, if you're on the podcast, I was doing some sort of weird move about driving well zoned out and just kind of half paying attention. You know that feeling. If you've ever driven, you know that feeling. A deer runs in front of you. A car cuts you off. What do? You jump up. Your whole body jumps up and you become attentive. So what was going on there? What was going on is the first 7 hours of this trip was pattern recognition. Your brain didn't have to think about very much. It was just going through the motions. It wasn't analyzing every piece of data all the time and saying, okay, we're chill, just zone out. Deer runs in front of you, car cuts you off. What is your brain doing? It's like, oh, new information. This is not a pattern. This is not a pattern. I better become aware. I better get on this. Okay. So just know that you can, that this is about pattern recognition, and you can change the patterns. Patterns are habits, and you can change those. The way you think about things, the way you do things. And if you know that you can change, if you're a negative thinker, you can change that. That's the most important thing, because negativity is not reality. Positive is not reality. It's just a frame. It's just a frame of how you choose to interpret a certain set of facts, or what you're perceiving to be facts. And the facts are probably distorted anyways. They're probably not even facts. It's a frame, and you can change it. Most important. So that's number one. Number two, limit the negativity that you expose yourself to. I've talked before on the show in the business context of turning around a business. Managers work with a troubled company, and for years, I'm working with them right now, for years, they've just been a shit. And how depressing is it to show up every day to work for years and know that things are probably going to be a little worse today than they used to be? You lose all of your passion. You lose all of the fun. Why did you even start in this business? As an owner of this particular troubled business, well, you can limit that. I encourage you to limit that. I've talked about finding the time of day. It could be the morning, could be at night, could be the middle of the day, whatever. Take an hour. If you take 2 hours, and if 2 hours is too much, go back to an hour. But just cram all of the crap that you need to get through, that you hate doing, that turns your stomach, that you've been avoiding. Do it all as hard as you can, as fast as you can in that 2 hours or that 1 hour, but then stop. Then stop, and for the rest of the day, work on things that are positive. Work on the things that will move your business forward. And what will happen is you've limited your exposure to the negativity, and you recharge yourself. You refine your purpose. You refine your passion. You clear your brain from the stresses that are on it, and you're able to move forward. I know what you're saying. You're saying, Scott, but I got so much crap. I got 18 hours of crap that I need to get through, of negativity, of all these bad things going on, and even the 18 hours a day, 7 days a week isn't enough to get that done. Yeah, okay. But after the 2 hours, you're not being productive. You're just worrying. You're worrying. You're going around in circles. You're not sure what to do. You're not being productive. If you just worked as hard as you can on bad things for 2 hours and then moved on, you'd be way better off. And you would be just as productive, or even more productive, and you'd be a hell of a lot happier. So that's number one is know that it's pattern recognition. You can change the filters, the way that you look at things. Number two is just limit your exposure to the bad things, to the negativity. And number three, start winning. There's a reason this show is called Winning Momentum. Pick something small and win. If you listen to Dr. Peterson and his 12 Rules for Life, which is a global massive seller. I think it's rule number one. I don't know, but I don't remember. But it's make your bed. Get up in the morning, make your bed. Accomplish something. Just do something. Do something and get that accomplishment, and then go from there. Don't go backwards. Don't go try to change the whole world. Wake up in the morning and make your bed is his point. Same thing in a business turnaround. Do something that is an accomplishment. Clean the plant. I go into manufacturing plants. They are old and messy. It's a troubled business, so there's no love. The maintenance isn't done. It's just dusty and dirty. And who the hell wants to work there? Clean the plant. Just clean it. Let's start somewhere. Let's have a clean plant in a manufacturing plant, and an environment that people would be happy in. That's starting to win. And now you wake up in the morning, you think, hey, things might be a little better today. At least they're cleaner. Hey, sanitation's been done in the bathroom. That's a positive thing. Cheers, everybody. those are the 20 items from John on mental filters. I thought it was interesting. It would be a good way to recap some of the things that we talk about on this show. I think I'm going to write an article about this as well and synthesize it down to 10 items, which I think is more appropriate. I think this was a stretch. Let me know what your thoughts are. Did we miss some? Did he miss some? Do you disagree with my analysis on them? I'd love to know. This has been Martinis with Scott. Hope you have a great week. We will talk to you next week, same time, same place for a drink. Please subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, other places I'm not sure about. Check it out. Check it out. Thank you for joining me.